Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from AnthonyMorganti.com. This is episode 13 of the video series where I critique and process your image. In this episode, we're taking a look at this very interesting scene from Noam. Now, I apologize in advance, Noam, if I am mispronouncing your name. This is a really interesting image, though. We have a point of interest. We have the fisherman here. And if you look closely throughout the scene, you'll find that there's a man walking on the wall way out here. On the ruined wall, we have a bird. And if we look off into the distance of the water, we have a couple boats. So there's a lot of little visual things that are interesting in the shot. Now, as far as the camera settings used for the scene, he used a Tamron 18 to 200 millimeter f/3.5 to 6.3 lens at 30 millimeters. So effectively at 30 millimeters, that is an f3.5 lens. Now, I mentioned in every single video that to use the lens at its best, at its sharpest, you should try to shoot a landscape 2 to 4 stops up from wide open. And somebody commented about me saying up from wide open. When I say up from wide open, I'm talking about up in number. So if you're at 3.5, 4 is up, 5.6 is up, 8 is up. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the actual size of the diaphragm when you're actually stopping down the lens when you use a bigger number. I'm just trying to keep things as simple as possible, and I always say it the same way, that we're going up from wide open. And actually, anyone that will teach that you'll find if you go to school for photography and they talk about lenses, aperture, and talking about shooting up from wide open, that's what they're talking about, up in number. That's consistent with every teacher I've ever had. So you're going to go up in number. So just in case I confused anyone in the past, you are stopping down the lens slightly, but you're going up in number. So we're at 3.5 at 30 millimeters, a third of a stop to get to the next whole stop. You would go to f4, so that's 1/3 of a stop. So f4 is plus 1/3. f5.6 is plus 1 1/3. f8 is plus 2 1/3, and f11 is plus 3 1/3. So Noam shot at f11, so perfect. It's a beautiful, beautiful shot. Lots of depth of field. Did a fine job. I didn't see where Noam might have focused. He did use a Canon, so we're going to go to Plugin Extras, Show Focus Points. Remember, this is a plugin that I demonstrated previously in a different episode. All right, so he used a single point focus. All these were the active focus points, but this is the focus point he used. Now, this is where this plugin, isn't effective. I doubt he focused right there. I suspect he pointed his camera down and focused down here, or focused on the sky over here, or on this wall over here, and then he recomposed the scene and took the shot. So this is where this is off. So, that with me, what I probably would have did, I would have focused on him because I think he's the subject of the scene, and I would have focused on him and shot at f11 like Noam did. If I'm mispronouncing again, I apologize. But I think it would have been more than enough depth of field to get everything nice in focus. So camera settings are great. Now, I'm going to be processing a virtual copy of the image just in case I decide to send it over into a plugin later. I'm not really sure. And then I'll have 3 separate images down here to show you the differences between all 3. I'm not sure yet if I will use a plugin. It's a very strong image on its own. It's kind of a standard landscape, not a lot here that needs to be done. So I think Lightroom would probably serve the purpose of processing this in full, but we'll see. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Lens Corrections. I'm going to remove Chromatic Aberration and enable Profile Corrections. Now I want to straighten it. So I'm going to open up the Crop tool. And the way I straighten an image is I just go outside the image till I get this double arrow on the cursor. I click with the left mouse button and I just eyeball it. And I do this probably 90% of the time on the images I want to straighten. And what I'm looking for in this case is I'm looking for a line that is near the horizon. And this has a very obvious horizon line in it, so it's relatively easy to straight. If there's not an obvious horizon line, I look for a vertical. There could be a telephone pole, and you're hoping the telephone pole goes straight up and down. In this case, we have a church steeple over here on the far right-hand side with a cross at the top, and that could be a little crooked. I don't know, but we'll see. To me, that's pretty straight right there. You can just kind of eyeball it, and that's good enough. Now, as far as the composition, if you see the rule of thirds, we could see that this guy over here, he's just not on this rule of intersection. And if I want to get him on that point of intersection, I would have to pull in from up here. And then if I do that, I lose the steeple and I lose this guy that's walking along the wall. And I don't want that at all. So is it okay to break a rule? Well, we're not really breaking a rule. If you look at it, I mean, the fishing pole that this guy has is right on the rule of thirds. Also, I would suspect that the golden spiral is going to be right near him. So I'm going to hit the O key on the keyboard to toggle through these different crop overlays. This is an interesting crop overlay, this diagonal. You can see it's going right along the fishing pole. So it's got a nice, I call that a soft diagonal again, where we have the fishing pole just kind of leading you through the shot like that. But we're going to hit O again. That isn't it? There we go. Oh, there. It's perfect. We're right over the top. And if I mentioned this in previous episodes. If you want to flip this around, hold the Shift key in and hit the O key, and then you'll flip it. You'll see now it's over here on the right, and just keep holding Shift and hit O, and you'll keep bouncing it around in different configurations until you get it, where you want it or need it, and then you could crop accordingly. So really, after straightening it, I don't think there's any cropping here required. I have a nice golden spiral going right on top of this guy over here. And we're still keeping this guy up here in the frame and the church steeple. And the main reason why I want to keep this guy here, it's something you won't notice right away. But I think once you're led through the image, you'll see that guy up there, and it will be a strong point of interest. And that's called visual weight. I'm going to close down the crop tool. He's so small in the image, but he's contrasting nicely against the bright wall behind him. So he's darker with his darker clothes, and he's just contrasting nicely against that. So he's sticking out in that aspect, the contrast aspect, and he's smaller. So that's visual weight. So we have a really nice example of visual weight in this shot. Now, I want to just mention, of all the hundreds of images that I've received so far, 99% of them don't have of the landscapes, and they're almost all landscapes that I've received, by the way, they don't have a real strong focal point. And I mention a lot of times, get a person in there. And it really does add a lot to your imagery, to your photography. If you could get a person in the shot. If you don't want to work with a person, a dog, a cat, I don't know, anything that will add something in there. And even an inanimate object would help. Now, in this scene, it wouldn't be practical, but what if you had an alleyway with a bunch of interesting shops and things on the side, but there were no people around, but you had a bicycle in there. You had a bicycle at one of these points of interest, either rule of thirds, golden spiral, something like that. That adds something to the shot. So I always encourage you, try to think of things you could add to these landscape images that really will push them over the top, that will give the person looking at your image a focal point to start with. If not start with, it could be something off in the distance, and then you'll have a leading line leading to them. And that's where they'll resolve at. So you really want this strong subject either at a point to begin or a point to resolve. So try to remember that. In this case, I think we have this interesting guy fishing over here, and we're going to resolve over here with this guy walking along the wall. So I think it's a pretty strong image just because of those two guys that are in the shot. And then, of course, we have other little things. We have a bright bucket down here. We have those boats off in the distance. And like I said, we have a bird up here on the wall. So, that's my soapbox, I think, for the day. Try to get a strong subject in your landscape shots. It'll really make it that much better. It could be a cow, it could be a cat, a dog, a person. Doesn't matter. Inanimate object, as long as it's a strong subject, it really will help your landscape images. All right, so now we're going to process it. I did the lens corrections, I straightened it. Um, I'm just, for the heck of it, just going to see what cloudy might look like. It's going to warm it up a lot, a little bit. Shade's going to warm it up a little more. I think I'm just going to go with as shot. I think I like it that way. Not a lot to do here. Let's see. We're going to pull highlights down just a little bit, just about to there. And I'm going to open shadows up, making it look real flat now. And when I'm looking, I just want to get, I'm going to pull them up quite high. I want to get some detail down in here and here. And we'll add some vibrance. Not a lot, like 9. I'm not going to add any saturation at all. We're going to go to the tone curve. This is where I prefer to add contrast. And we're going to add medium contrast, then strong contrast. I like strong contrast for this example. Now, at this point is where if I do use a plugin, I would send it over to the plugin. And I usually take sharpening down to 0 when I do that. So I'm going to create another virtual copy, and if I do send it to a plugin, I will send the third copy, which is the second virtual copy, over to the plugin. But I'm going to continue processing this image completely in Lightroom. So we're going to get a quick white point by holding in the Shift key and double-clicking on the word whites, and then get a quick black point by doing the same thing, but double-click on the word blacks. And I think, again, it made it just a little too white. Now I want to see if anything's clipping. You could hit the J key on your keyboard and you'll get clipping indicators. You can see we're clipping a little bit black down here. See these blue blotches? If I was clipping anything white, we'd get white, or we get, I'm sorry, red blotches. So I'm going to hit the J key again to turn off those clipping indicators. But I am going to hold the Alt or Option key in. It's Alt if you have a PC, Option if you have a Mac, and click on this slider for whites. And you can see I'm clipping the blues a tiny bit over there in the left quarter, the lower left part of the image. And I'm just going to back that off until that disappears. Right about there. Okay, I think I like that a little bit better. I'm going to add some clarity. Now when I'm adding clarity, I think it's making it a little bit too contrasty for my taste. So I'm going to go back to the tone curve and go to medium contrast, and that helped that a little bit. But I do like that it added the clarity. Now, I don't think there's anything I need to do in the HSL color and B&W tab at all. I like the colors the way they are. We'll go split toning similarly. We're going to go to the detail tab, and I'm going to start with noise reduction as I typically do. And I'm just looking, there's not a lot of noise at all. So I'm going to start at 40, and it pretty much obliterated the noise. Okay, so I'm going to bring it down to 30 or so, 29 for the sake of argument. Tiny bit of noise, very, very little noise. So I'm going to bring it up to 35, which is pretty much half the difference between 30. Well, it's exactly half the difference between 30 and 40, but I was at 29, so it's almost in the middle. I'm going to zoom back out. We're going to add some sharpening. I'm just going to arbitrarily throw it on 70. Oh, I really liked how it sharpened the ruined wall here. That looks really good. Now it did enhance the noise in the sky a little bit, but what we're going to do is we're going to mask that out. So I'm going to hold the Alt or Option key. Again, it's Alt if you have a PC, Option if you have a Mac. I'm going to click right on the masking slider and we get this white screen. And I'm just going to move it to the right. Wherever it's white is where the sharpening is being applied, and wherever it's black is where sharpening is not being applied. So I think that's a properly sharpened image with noise reduction applied. So I think we're done there. Now, I think finally we could just go down here to the post crop vignette. I'm going to add a darker vignette. And if anyone wonders why I always add a dark vignette, or often, Add a dark vignette. It helps push everyone's attention more towards the middle. If you have anything exceptionally bright in the outside of the image, in this case the clouds, a viewer's eyes tend to drift to the brightest part of the image. And you don't really want them to look up here or up here. You want them to look at this dude here with the bright shirt, follow his pull through the scene, and then eventually, hopefully, see this guy up here walking along the wall. And if you're interested in a bird, you can see the bird up there too. So I kind of like that as it is, and I actually think this image is done. It was a very easy edit. I think the image kind of spoke for itself. There wasn't really a lot to enhance. I talk about depth a lot in photography, and it's a two-dimensional medium. We have the x-axis and the y-axis, but there's nothing for the z-axis going off into the distance. But you could give that illusion by how you shoot the image or shoot the scene and process the image. And in that case, I think this image has a lot of depth. Just a lot of stuff. We have this guy in the foreground, we have midground elements, and then we have the background elements, and we have this great backdrop of the water and the clouds. So it's a really cool image. Now, for the sake of argument, for those of you that want to hang around, I'm going to take this image. Now, remember I did basic panel stuff. I didn't do the whites. I should have did. Just do whites and blacks real quick. I'm going to bring the whites down exactly as I did last time. And I don't add any clarity here at all. So I'm just leaving that alone. I did bring detail down to 0, so I'm going to send this over to Topaz Denoise, which is my preferred plugin for noise. So we're going to do that. We're going to edit a copy because it is a virtual copy. And it's going to create this TIFF file, and it will be opening up in Denoise. All right, so it was a Canon EOS 550D. I don't think there's a preset for that. So let's just try something. We'll just go to the lowest, like a PowerShot SX. And, I don't know, we'll take grain down. That pretty much obliterated noise. Trouble is, see, you don't want to take it out so, be so heavy-handed that you lose detail. And my complaint with Topaz Denoise is this preview is horrible. I mention that every time I use it. The resolution isn't that great. So I'm going to ride with this. I'm just using this preset. It did obliterate the noise. And as I always do for any of the presets, this add grain slider, I always bring all the way down to 0. If you add grain sometimes to an image, fine grain, it gives the illusion that the image is sharper than it actually is. And I don't want to do that. I don't want any grain in the image at all. This all comes down to personal choice and creative choices that you make as you're processing. There's a lot of people I know that like their images to be grainy, especially a lot of street photographers I know. They like to have that grain look in their shot. And, by all means, if that's your style, go for it. This isn't right or wrong. This is just the way I like my images. I usually like my images to be very, very clean, no noise, high detail. That's the way I process images. That's the look I like to achieve. So I encourage you to do it your way, what appeals to you. So once it blinks a couple times as Lightroom gets caught up with the metadata here, we'll have our noise reduced image. Here we go. Now we have this virtual copy I created. I'm going to get rid of that now because I don't need it. So we could make things simple. So I have this. Now I'm going to send it over to On1 Effects 10, which is what I think I'm going to use for this. I mentioned I'm going to send the original. I generally use On1 Effects 10. I'm now working with On1 RAW. I'll be doing some videos on that hopefully soon. I'm learning all the ins and outs of that. For black and white, though, I still use Nik Silver Effects Pro, and I think I did one of these videos, previous videos, I used Silver Effects Pro, but I prefer that for black and white images. Now, a couple different ways. I mean, over here on the left, we have actual presets, and if we look at, let's see here, bear with me. there's something here. Well, if we look at the landscape presets, you can see that we have a ton of different looks you could get with this preset, like this radiance look, or what's this, a magic desert look. Let's see what that looks like. And once it renders. So you could see that you could actually pick a preset and it comes kind of prefabbed with these filters done in such a way. And I kind of like that one actually. It might be a touch colorful, but I kind of like it. If we go there, go to this color enhancer, I think it's a tiny bit too colorful. So I'm going to bring the color enhancer's opacity to 50. So we're at only half the strength. And go to Vignette. It's still a little bit actually way too colorful for me. So I'm going to reset this. I'm going to just do it the way I typically would do this. Um, I don't think I want to enhance the color. I like the colors the way they are. What I might do though is get a tone enhancer. It might help contrast. Don't really care for that. We'll turn off auto. Let's see if we bring just a little brightness down a touch. Not necessarily. So I'm going to can that. This is typically what I do. I just try different filters that pop into my mind that I think I might want to try. Here's a sunshine filter, which I've used before. I don't like glow. Radiance is okay. Strong. Sun glow I don't care for. Sunshine is okay. Warm highlights is very subtle, and I think that would be the one. You can see what it's doing to the clouds up there. I kind of like that. So we're going to go with sunshine. And then I'm going to go with my typical dynamic contrast. Might be a little strong. I usually dial this down a little bit. I'm going to try it around 70, give or take. And then I'll add my vignette and call it a day probably. Now there's so much more you could do with this On1 Effects. There's strong, soft, kind of like strong, but we're going to back it off just a little. I mean, you could give things a very urban look or a grunge look. You could, do black and white with it if you want, but I kind of like it like this. Like I mentioned, this was a super strong scene. As it stood on its own merits. We really don't have to do a lot of post-processing with it. And, um, there is, okay, there's the original. There's the Lightroom version. There's the version that we began in Lightroom and we kind of finished up in On1 Effects. And in between we did Denoise. We got rid of noise with Denoise. So the sunshine filter kind of made this clouds and stuff a little brighter. And if you wanted to match that, you could come up here and you could bring whites up. Try to match it a little better. So there's that. Again, the original, we'll just select them all. And we'll do this. Okay, there are all three. This one is of course, the original unprocessed image. This one is the Lightroom only image, and this one is the one that was done with Denoise, Lightroom, and started out in Lightroom. Then we went to Denoise. Then we finished up in On1 Effects 10. So that's it. Like I said, I don't think we really needed the plugin for this one. I think Lightroom did a great job. I don't know. What do you guys think? I think the Lightroom's nice. I like that one. So that's it for episode 13. Again, Noam, if I mispronounced your name, I apologize profusely. I love your image, though. Thank you for sharing it with us, and thank you, everyone that watches my videos. I truly do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.